Good idea. Okay, and so here we are. First of all, welcome, David. Welcome to the show. Great to have you here. And welcome everyone, everyone outside. It's great to have that many people around. I don't really know how many people we have, because usually these numbers never really work out. So if you just start to listening and basically watching us, feel free to just drop a quick hello in the chat, maybe also where you are right now, where you're tuning in, so that we at least get a little bit of feeling that we are, I don't know, worldwide. People watching worldwide. And so, but first of all, welcome, David. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Timo. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, you were really high on my list, because I always try to do the introduction by the things that I know. So I would start there. So I know from you, so I don't start with the obvious ones. So I start with the ones that maybe are not so obvious. So I know that you test plenty of data tools and data products, and you write about concepts as well. So I will ask you some questions about that in a second. So this is something I know, and how you do this. So you definitely write more than I do. So you're definitely one of the kind of role models that I have to really say, okay, I have to do that, put out, because you have your own Substack. You write for your product Substack with Delphi. And you do stuff on LinkedIn as well. So it's really it's always great to have your pieces, and you do this wonderful series and sequences, like your 5-part sequence about the semantic layer, which I can really recommend everyone to read, because I think this at the moment it's kind of the best summary in the industry to read. And then coming to more important points, you are the founder and CEO of Delphi, co-founder. So you do this together with, I think it's Michael.
Michael.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and the nice thing about Delphi, and this is where we will talk about as well, is Delphi is a true BI AI data startup. So it's not something hey, we already had a product and now we just put the OpenAI API somewhere in there. So it's really so you are really building something from the ground up with this kind of paradigm. And so I think this where we might really spend a lot of time today. And finally, this is also interesting, you are the organizer of the London Data Meetup. And it's not I don't know if it's at least I saw you basically started this last year. Is it like this, or was it already before and it's just not visible from the history?
No, it's been, I think the first one was last summer, and then we did, it was originally called London Data Quality, but then I think that was quite niche, and we ended up having a broad range of topics around analytics anyway, so I rebranded it to London Analytics Meetup. So we just had our 4th meetup. It was really, really good. And hoping to have another one probably either late July or early September.
And this is really great because I would say there was this big wave of meetups. So I can remember I was still in Berlin at that time. And so it basically we had data meetups popping up every week and all the different kind of, let's say, niche topics and so on. But you are doing now kind of a revival. So is it a good time now to do a revival of a meetup again? So what was the idea to start something like this?
So it's funny, in London, the meetup scene was very good, especially because I think it's because London may well be the #1 DBT city in the world, right? And we ended up with the official DBT meetup, which a company called Datatonic hosts in their very high tower in Canary Wharf, and then we had London Analytics Engineering meetup as well. And both of these are packed. They're 200 people packed to the rafters every time. So there's just a lot of hunger for data meetups in London. And I think maybe it's just because of the size of the data community being big enough in London to cope, to have the demand for it. So I haven't felt that there was a dip. It's just kept going.
Or is it maybe really that, after this 2 years of doing virtual stuff, so that you can really feel this kind of hunger to really get together and discuss stuff, data?
100%. I also think there's this thing where a lot of people are still quite remote, And so
Yeah.
they like the meetups as their way of, oh, let's go into town, let's meet some people. And that's what they use. That's partly what they're using the meetups for, right? Is a substitute for their old office interactions, right?
This is kind of a funny thing. So whenever it's quite often when I talk to people who are, let's say, at least like you expect they are in London, but when I talk to them, they are like, oh yeah, on this day I will go into town. So it always looks like that. I don't know. You really have this people like not really actually living in London, maybe like, I don't know,
No,
Brighton and so
honestly,
on. And that,
yeah. Over half the people who work in London don't actually live in London. It's like me, I commute in, and so that's also going to contribute to it because they're not living in a city.
yeah.
They feel very like stir crazy at home.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how long is your commute? I already heard very scary numbers of people commuting into London.
So mine is, the train journey is like 50 minutes, but it's like
Okay.
a nice air conditioned. I get a seat there, I get a seat home. And so like, what I typically do in that 50 minutes is write, because it's just the most wonderful time to focus, because you have one screen, you run out of internet a lot of the time. So writing always works, and it's my favorite place to write is on a train. Yeah.
Are you planning to get a Vision Pro to basically upgrade your ride even more? So like to have this weird experience to really sit this with this goggles on?
I mean, it does look really good. It's just so expensive.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But it's quite funny. A friend of mine, he was really like early on in this kind of, oh, I want to have just a VR device to have this multi display setup, and he did weird things like using it on these high speed trains in Germany, and it worked quite well, but it didn't really work quite well when they really get into really like more into curves and so on. So like when this place and motion tracking was totally get up, and so he had some weird experience with that, but it was really early on. So but that's interesting. So because like this explains why how you find the time to write. I think this is like still something where I'm struggling with. So I still at the moment I'm thinking about to go back to have one day in the week where I really can focus on this stuff to really get things done, because like at the moment I don't have a commute, so I basically just stay at home, and so yeah, I think in that case I miss it. But so what is nice about your writing is like, because like, I mean, it's also nice to have people to write about general thoughts about the industry, but what I like about your stuff is that you basically take specific kind of tools and specific kind of concepts, and it really looks, so you can really see that you really go into them and so really try to test them out. So maybe as the first question, so where does this, let's say, the motivation for that come from? Because like it's often quite an effort to really, I mean, it often sounds so simple, but it's quite an effort to pick something and then really like test it out and so on. So where does it come from?
So like let's take like the orchestrators, right? So
yeah, exactly.
The thing is, before I had written about Airflow, I'd never touched it. I'd never needed to. So I'd use things like DBT Cloud to schedule my DBT jobs. I had streaming data, pushing my data into Snowflake like via Snowpipe. I didn't actually need Airflow. So I was like, maybe I need to learn Airflow, because otherwise I can't say I'm a data engineer, right? But
that's the reason. So you have to do this to basically get accepted. Okay, I should put this on my list.
But no, really, I wanted to learn about it because everyone talks about it. It's probably the most used tool alongside DBT by people in our space. And I've heard a lot of good and bad things about it. So I just wanted to see what it was all about. And so that's why I did that series. And yeah, I learned, some bad things about it, but then also like actually the core of what you can do with it is powerful as well.
So I think like, I mean, the interesting thing is like I'm always also like try to encourage people to really do this stuff. So also like they don't have to write about it. I mean, I would love to when more people would write or record videos about it. I mean, this would be fantastic. But I think still, if you even don't just write about it, I think it's even a very valuable thing to just figure stuff out. I mean, you don't really have to plan it to use it, but at least like to get an idea for concept. So because you can really see, so when you read your orchestrator series, it's really nice to see how you test out. I think you tested all the three. So I think Airflow, Dexter, and Prefect.
I didn't try Prefect in the end. I was thinking about it, but then I got to the end of Dagster and I'd done like 8 posts and spent a lot of time playing with them, and I'd say I was orchestrated out for 2022. And I was thinking about, and also I spoke to Anna, who was at Prefect at the time, and she was saying, she kind of showed me how I would build what I had built in Dagster, because it was relatively simple. And I realized I can see the value in Prefect, but it's not really for someone like me. It's probably for someone who works in a much more Pythonic way. Whereas for I think people who use a lot of SAS tools, who write a lot of SQL and a lot of DBT, Dagster is definitely the tool I would recommend over Prefect.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. So because maybe that might explain, because I started out with Prefect, and yeah, it's very close to how you work with Python, and so like also like it takes some time to get your head around this decoupling, which is really interesting. But on the other hand, really like, oh my god, so how does it work? Where do I basically host the stuff? But the interesting thing is, and this is like why I always like would recommend it to other people as well. It's like because what you can see from your posts is there are some core concepts, but then it's also like interesting how these core concepts are basically getting sometimes challenged or sometimes refactored in another tool. And so what would you recommend for, let's say, someone who's like on a small data engineering team and so on? So what is a good approach to open up your mind and test out new stuff?
Yeah, I think you do need to do a bit of reading first and like see like which things out there. Like, so for example, if you are choosing an orchestrator, you'd see, okay, Airflow is obviously the most written and known one.
Yeah.
But then you've got Prefect, you've got Dagster, you've got Mage, you've got Kestra. And it's like, well, which of these suit me best? Like, do I need a cloud offering? Okay, that knocks out 2, right? Do I need how do I want to work with it? Am I going to use like a lot of SAS, like paid for SAS? Like that then suits Airflow or Dagster more than Prefect. If I'm going to use DBT heavily, actually then, Dagster starts to have a lot of power. But am I going to do more like stuff actually in custom Python? Then maybe Prefect's a better choice. Like that it's like you have to start, what you do is you end up with, you have this short list of possibly good tools, and you try and knock them out based on your requirements.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It's also like a good exercise, because at some point you sometimes have to select tools for, let's say, really like proper work, and this maybe is already a good start. And if you can just do it for test sessions, maybe it's a good training to learn, okay, what you're really looking for. I mean, I think at the moment you have so much other stuff to do, but do you have something in your backlog that you want to play around and test in the next time?
Yeah, so I had planned to do a series on Databricks. I'm not sure I'm going to get around to that.
That would be lovely.
It would be cool. But it would have to be a big one. Right? There's so many pieces in Databricks. So at my meetup last week, I had one vendor called E6 Data came and presented, and it was really cool. Like what they showed was, it's like a query engine that runs on like lakes. So Query Parquet, Delta, Iceberg, but they did this live benchmark of them versus Databricks, absolutely smoked Databricks, and like it was over 95% faster and that much cheaper as well. And I was like amazed. And the benchmarks are very similar against some of the other data warehouses. So I feel like I've got to play around with this and see see what I can find. See if I can find some rough edges as well that need smoothing out before it goes big. But that's very exciting.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. So, but yeah, then you can really do good maybe benchmark series. I think they are quite popular. So people, for some reasons, like this stuff where you can really say, "Oh my God, I can really improve the query." But I think the interesting thing, what you already said, is like what we see right now is like, I mean, this is the crazy stuff about data. It's like data. I think at the moment is the only space that fundamentally change fundamental concepts or fundamental paradigms every 3 or 4 years. So everyone thought, okay, we are settled, Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, good. So Redshift, sorry, hard time for you. You were in the old generation. But now basically we already see a new generation coming afterwards, which is quite crazy.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
Yeah, I think I would still vote for the Databricks one because like I have so many questions and I have a lot of people asking me, and I always also felt the need to at some point really like to figure out, okay, what makes it different, what yeah, to not just basically scratch the surface, but I haven't had time for this as well. But maybe let's do a little bit of because like it fits into what new stuff is coming, and I think this is like not the only reason why I wanted to have you here, but definitely a big kind of reason, because like so I think so how did you you basically building together with Michael, you building Delphi, and at the moment, so how would you describe Delphi right now?
Yeah, so I think with Delphi, we're beyond a prototype, right? We've got, people using it, people about to pay for it, so we're at that level where MVP is out there, and we keep releasing new features and integrations all the time. So that's kind of like where we are in terms of product. We want to do obviously we're very early. We want to do a lot more to it, but we're not at the point where it's before we could sell it. And as you mentioned, right, I have that Delphi Substack that I use for like product releases and other thoughts around it as well. With Delphi, I guess like if you think about what it is today, it's a natural language interface for data. That's usually how I would describe it. And I think, yes, we do use AI and the large language models of the day, and we have multiple choices. Like we have GPT-4, Claude. We recently got GCP's Cody, and we've got open source as well. So we've got like a lot of choices in there. One thing I'd say is like, I'm not sure with some of the other tools that you've maybe seen out there that are doing like text to SQL, which is not what we're doing. I think like the large language model is the star of the show because that's the whole thing that's going on. Whereas what we're trying to do with Delphi is actually solve that whole workflow of how like a stakeholder comes with a question and gets an answer safely. And there's that whole, like the way I describe it is like a triage, because that's the way I see it. It's like hospital triage. Where they come in with this question, and a lot of things need to happen before any work happens, right? First of all, is there anything similar that has been asked before? Are there dashboards that already exist if we've connected to a BI tool, for example, that are semantically similar to this question? And if so, can we reuse them to answer the question? Because that's a safe answer. It's been built by someone probably in the data team. It's been validated. If we provide that as an answer, it's much better than creating a new request. And so we go through these kind of steps. And, one of the great things as well is sometimes we can't answer the question. I like that. That's a feature for me. And the reason why that happens is because Delphi uses semantic layers, right? So with a semantic layer, you're giving that large language model a model of the world it's supposed to be operating on, right? And so when you don't do that, and that's like what some of the text to SQL companies are doing, you're kind of relying on the large language model having a model of the world from its pre-training, which is everything it's consumed before. And so I think the way it then like builds up knowledge is not necessarily going to be correct. And so because it's constrained to what's in the semantic layer, the way we implement, we can say, oh, sorry, the question you've asked for, that's not like anything in this world. Speak to your data team, or here's the catalog of the semantic layer. choose something from here to ask for. I think that's like so important. You know, if you have a tool that's guessing all the time and getting things wrong, I just think, how is this ever going to be good enough for enterprise? How are you going to put this into the hands of like your non-technical users and expect them to trust it, or worse yet, they do trust it and start running off, you know, rubbish data. And so then, you know, that's what's really core to us is safety in the answer. And you know, because Michael and I both led data teams, we know that trust is so hard to gain as a data team and very easy to lose.
Yeah, we can even talk about trust maybe a little bit more later, because like it's such a, how to say, sometimes really underestimated thing that yeah. But you're right, because like I just had the image when you were just talking about like to give really, let's say, to give the answer that people can really work with. I mean, imagine an analyst when you talk to him or her, is really like, yeah, I guess this could be something. Oh, I just found out that we don't have this table, and so it's like it doesn't really work well. And the also like the interesting part, what you just mentioned, what you really pointed out, this is the thing that immediately stand out when I was testing Delphi. This, because like you build on top of the semantic layer, you have this, let's say, very honest feedback to say, okay, honestly, we cannot really find a reference to answer this question. Or let's say you like Delphi is also like giving back like, okay, we have a slight idea, this might be a solution, so do you happy with that or not? So I really like this, because like this gives, at least like for me, so I'm not the end user yet, but I'm more like the one who's basically responsible for the quality. And this makes it so interesting, because like I'm the one who's responsible for the semantic layer. So Delphi gives me an interface where I can see what stuff is working and what not. And I have a clear way to solve it, because I solve it in the metrics layer or in the semantic layer. And so, and this was something that I really, really like about the product, because like I was trying stuff, I didn't really got the answer, and it was not like, oh, come on, it's really like, it's let's say the chatbot. No, it was totally clear for me. It's like I was just missing, or I basically did not configure the stuff right. So for example, Delphi was trying to handle some date stuff, but like the one date field it was relying on was, I was just too lazy to basically cast it as a date. So it was just still a string, and so I couldn't really handle it. But I could take this feedback and can just do a refactoring, and then the whole thing got better. And so this is great. So like this, yeah, I can work with it. So this is, I think, really interesting. So maybe taking a step back. So where came the idea, or where came the idea for Delphi from, and so what and basically how you got involved, and so how was everything starting out? So what was like the core motivation? Was it really like, I mean, you can also be open, say, hey, we just wanted to do something with AI, and this was the first thing we can thought of. But I guess it's not, because like you guys think differently.
Yeah, so I think that kind of roots back to like what Michael wanted to do, and I think this was Michael realizing in, I think, late last year that what if I could generate this, like, what if I could use the prompt engineering process to generate a semantic layer, like API requests, rather than SQL, because everyone was doing SQL at this time. I think that was his curiosity, because I think he realized that it would be potentially a lot more reliable than that if he did that. So that was his motivation, I think, behind the prototype. And then he asked for some people to try it out early this year, and because I knew him through the DBT community, that's actually how we even met. I said, yeah, I can try it out. I've got like a stack to try it out on. And so because I did that, we ended up like hacking together on it for a bit, trying out a few things, and my brain kind of got like going on it. I realized, hang on, because I'd written about Ask Edith, which is one of the text to SQL tools, the previous year, and I could see, oh wow, there's so much potential about what we can build beyond just one hit question answer. And because of the semantic layer, it enables this whole workflow. And that's what we've been building beyond what Michael's prototype was. And that's kind of like how I got got involved with that. So I asked Michael, what did you want to do with this? And he was like, well, I did want to make it a company, or I was thinking about it, but I think he was feeling daunted by doing it by himself and fundraising by himself. And so I said, well, I've got some of that experience. Should we join up? That's kind of like how Delphi as a company came to be.
Yeah, but okay, that's really interesting. Also, interesting that let's say the semantic layer was already there. Let's say from the initial idea, because this really. So when you were, I think I saw a post where you were describing, and this was definitely the trigger that brought me to ping you and say, hey, yeah, so if you need alpha testers, so I would be available too. Because I tested some text to SQL, and it was interesting, but not really something that, I don't know, motivated me enough to really investigate that. But the semantic layer is totally different. So maybe, so let's assuming, okay, some people, there might be still some people around who say, okay, what is this weird semantic layer thing? So maybe let's take a step back. So how would you explain semantic layer, and also is it a metrics layer? What is semantic layer? So because let's choose one basically equally flowing around.
So let me start with let's pretend they're the same for now. But
yes,
a semantic layer maps real world things like orders, customers, revenue to your actual logical data structure, whether that's columns and tables or whether that's files in a data lake. Either way, that's what the semantic layer does at its core. And there's a lot of stuff that gets wrapped around it. So for example, if you look at Cube, for example, Cube has caching, it has RBAC, it has a bunch of other nice things that comes with it. But the core of the semantic layer is that simplicity. And the joy of it is that you have consistency in knowing what things mean, reusability. You're not always having to rewrite the same SQL code and get it wrong and have it inconsistent. And it's just I don't understand how anyone can have single source of truth in a company of any scale without a semantic layer. I honestly don't know how it would work, because I've seen I've seen without semantic layer, and we got close to that, and there are problems, but that's also organizational. And then without the semantic layer, and there's just no, you have the few reports that you can kind of trust because they've been battle tested and not changed for ages, and everything else is maybe that's wrong. And yeah, so that's kind of semantic layer for me. The difference for me between a semantic layer and a metric layer is relatively simple, in that a true semantic layer has entities. So it actually can have something like, this is a customer. Mm-hmm. Right? And how do I define the customer? The customer is the unique ID from this table, right? And it's not a metric, it's not a dimension, it's just a thing. And that's the entity. So not all, so some metrics layers aren't semantic layers because they don't have that concept. So for example, for example, if you've used Lightdash isn't, Lightdash has its own kind of basic metrics layer that comes with it. So if you in case you haven't adopted DBTs yet, they have that, but it's not a semantic layer because it doesn't have entities. And there are some ones like metric flow, for example. Metric flow kind of is a semantic layer because it assumes entities, right? It assumes your data model is modeled in such a way that some of your tables are entity tables, and therefore I guess it's it's a semantic layer because it assumes entities, right? But there are others that don't have them as well.
But I guess there's still a lot of potential in the future, especially so I would define it in the same way that basically metric layer is a part of a semantic, or a special part of a semantic layer, or a representation within the semantic layer, and I'm totally curious to see where this stuff is going when we start to broaden it up, because the thing, what you also just explained, what really stands out to me, and then we are coming back to Delphi as well, it's I would still say the biggest challenge for us is maybe not data warehouses or let's say the speed of the stuff, but let's say the really final big problem that we still have is like bridging these last, let's say the last, someone I know always called like the last mile of analytics.
Yeah.
So basically like, so we do fancy cool stuff. So we have prepared everything, our nice pipelines bring everything to one point, and then we are missing that from this point, it has to get in a, often even like in a totally different shape, that someone, let's say from a sales team or growth team, they can say, oh yeah, this is really useful. So now I can basically put it into my daily job. So to match data into the daily jobs of people is still quite hard. And the interesting thing about the semantic layer is like, because it takes the approach to define things from the business side and then maps it to the technical data side, which at least like from my experience make discussions with people a lot easier because they immediately get. So an order, usually you could assume that someone in a company has an idea what an order is about. And they don't really care from which kind of table it's coming from or if it has to be constructed and so on. In the end, they care about the order. So, but I still, but like you said it as well, it's like, it's hard to imagine how companies can exist without a semantic layer. But I would say 96% of data teams, maybe more, exist without data layer. Not data layer 2, but with the semantic layer. And so I don't know what could be a good. So how can we promote this in a better way? I mean, you wrote about it, and I think like after you read your 5 articles about this should motivate you to test it out. But what else can happen? I mean, of course, like for example, if Delphi is getting more and more better, then people will say, okay, I need this stuff to run it. But what else can help that people start to invest into semantic layer? Is it like that the tools are not powerful, that the existing semantic layer is not powerful enough, or where do you think is like this? How to say, the barrier still too high that people don't adopt it?
I think part of it is people just being busy. Like every time I speak to a data leader, for example, they've just moved job. There seems to always they always seem to have just joined the company, and they're setting up their pipelines, right? So they're not near. Half the time, data people aren't even at. They're still working on building their data pipelines and building their transforms, and then they'll get to it. So that's part of it is tenure and like the focus. The other part of it is a lot of data people haven't touched them, right? They don't really understand them, and it's a bit of an abstract concept. I think one way that we could solve for this is actually through automation, and I've seen like a number of approaches. So, for example, like you've got Reconfigured, you've got Cyvo, who are both going to provide like nice ways for people to either build their whole DBT project and their semantic layer, or just the semantic layer. And Reconfigured have like a Typeform interface, and Cyvo have like a GUI interface. Then you've also got things like say like there's a UK data consultancy called Rittman Analytics, you may know. They've built this tool called Drowty, and Drowty is like an open source piece of software which generates a semantic layer from your DBT project, because your DBT project is absolutely stuffed full of the metadata that you need to build a semantic layer. It tells you how to join tables together. It tells you how to aggregate some things, maybe not everything, but just getting to like that MVP of the semantic layer where it's deployed, it's accessible, and then you can work from there. That's a big lift, right? I think. And then once the team's got that, they can say, oh, okay, I'll add to it. But once it's there and it's usable, that's a really good step. And so, I think those kinds of approaches, and we're considering that kind of like Drowty type approach for setting people up with a semantic layer, if possible, in the near future. Just like you said, most data teams don't use them, so we just need to help them get there.
Maybe as a final question on that, because like you just mentioned it in the beginning, that people are still like, okay, we have to get the data pipelines going, so we have to figure out how we do the data transformation modeling and so on. So what do you think? So I mean, it often like here's like, okay, I have to get first everything in place, and then I can start out. But wouldn't be So for me, like the semantic layer is kind of an invitation to use it from day one, because it already paints a good picture where you want to go. And so it's kind of a plan that you want to fulfill. So what do you think about what's a good time to start?
I totally agree. So I did some consulting recently, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't think about it in terms of a semantic layer. I thought about what are the entities and metrics and then the dimensions you want to know about them by. And I'd ask like finance, I'd ask marketing, I'd ask product, I'd ask buying, and I'd ask them all like these questions. And a lot of the time there's a lot of overlap, but there's some unique things to each domain. And when you've got those things and you put them all in one place, that's the semantic layer. That's you haven't it's the top of it. You haven't mapped it back to the data, but you've got this is the content that is required to be in the semantic layer, if possible, from data.
Yeah. I sometimes think maybe we should make it a requirement for data teams to at least visit one domain-driven design conference a year, because like the interesting thing is you can find a lot of stuff there that you can use in this kind of thing, because like, I mean, it's more like a software engineering principle, but in the end, like it's covering the same stuff. So it's, what you just said. So, I mean, you design domains, business domains. So you figure out what kind of entities do we have. So what actions happen in these entities? How do the process look like?
The domain-driven design, definitely. Because if you think about who's made that data that you're going to be using as a data person, it's a software engineer. Whether it's at your company or another, it's a software engineer.
Just go over and say hello to them. So they're usually really nice guys. So and can help you a lot to understand these things. So
yeah, they like coffee and donuts. Yeah,
they do. Yes, this is something that people often underestimate. So I have a history in working in product, and I would say my best product hack was like totally bribe the software developers. So just like be the one in the product team who always have something nice they like. So you listen to, okay, what someone likes, and you just bring it, because you know it helps you when you want to bring in a new epic to get done. So, and it's the same with data. So just figure out what they like, buy it, go over. And so like, I think,
Goodwill's on the balance sheet of companies, you know.
Yeah. 100%. I think this is, this could be really interesting. So yeah, I think this is a good takeaway to really say, okay, maybe it's really like something to start out with, and even like when you even not plan to implement some, but at least like think in the kind of, let's say, schema or like kind of the approach. Okay, I want to come back to Delphi. So one thing, and this was the thing where I think I answered on one of your posts on LinkedIn, where I say, okay, this is the stuff that I wanted to ask you. And so here we go. So the interesting thing is, like, I had some conversations with different kind of companies, and I sometimes have it myself. We all say, hey, it all starts with the right questions. So like this often, like a lot of data consultants saying is like, yeah, you just have to focus on get the right questions, and then we can find the right data for it. The interesting thing is, like, what if you don't have questions? So how do you approach this thing if you don't really have a question? So is this something that you're already starting to think about in the Delphi context? So what you can do maybe to even, to lead people to some kind of questions, to come up with some kind of inspiration and so on. Because like a friend of mine has this nice saying, which he always said to me, is like, he always feels like men staring on data, because like he's like, I have no idea what I should ask here. And I think it's real, that the struggle is real to some degree.
Yeah, so I think that's where you come, like, so there's question driven, and then I think there's like entity driven, maybe, that I would say. So let's imagine you go back to the semantic layer and you say, okay, well, maybe I want to find out what people have asked about customers, or what have people asked about orders. And you can see maybe the questions and the frequency that people have asked about those things, and what sorts of questions people have asked. And that might inspire you, or that might actually just be, oh, okay, I think that's the thing I wanted to know. I think once you start playing around with entities and metrics and seeing what's there, you probably start ending up being inspired to have questions.
That's true, and this might be also like really like the chance now for this So because like with the systems before, you really had to very precise. So in the end, it was just like you writing the query with natural words to some degree. And now I will try this later, so if it works already. But now I could, for example, go in and can say, hey, tell me something interesting about our customers. So I mean, this would be really something interesting if you can put this in a machine and they come back. Yeah, actually, I don't know what could come back, what could be interesting, but maybe, for example, like, hey, we saw a big increase in people signing up with the same email domain. So this is, for example, something which at the moment I look at, but it would not be something obvious if you don't really think about it to come up with this stuff. So is this something that you at the moment think, or maybe in the future, maybe not at the moment, but in the future think about as well to test out, let's say, more?
Yeah, I suppose so. And I guess it's more like if you don't have a specific question and it's more like status. I feel like in the future, something like Delphi could even like produce almost like a notebook type summary of how are things going. And it's more like, I don't want it to be like it's not like a dashboard which just has the standard graphs.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like let's go through the data and see interesting things that we can pull out. And because it's a machine that can hit hundreds of permutations without breaking a sweat or without taking any time, that's so much more possible. Whereas if you ask an analyst to do that today, it's like go through all the possible dimensions and metric chains or metric trees and see what's interesting. Like they'll be like, what? Are you serious? That would take me forever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think the interesting thing is, and like, I don't know when we get there, but right now it's really like these, let's say, ChatGPT and everything else, they're just waiting for us. So we have to go in there, we have to put something in there. I think for ChatGPT, it's fine. It would be even scary. It would be if it would be the other way around. So if I just get a notification that like the chat is asking me something, but I'm just thinking about the data. I think in the data space, it could be really interesting because like, at least like, especially when I work with teams who are very, very far away from working with data, they have a lot of fears and how to say, they are not really confident to do this kind of stuff. And so if there could be a machine that basically comes out, hey, I'm really nice and I have something that I want to share with you. So here we go. So like this, basically mimicking these approaches that really good data teams were trying out to make the data more data aware. So my favorite example was one who reported like they had really problems that people checking metrics. So they printed out the most important metrics and were hanging them in the indoors of the toilets. So because people were sitting down and they just had to look at it. And this worked pretty well. And so this could be interesting if let's say an interface does similar things. So like, oh yes, I see you around, so I have something to share with you. I don't know. I know it's crazy, but did you thought about these kind of stuff?
The thing that I thought about recently, which sounds kind of creepy, but the thing is, I've done it as a person. It's not creepy as a person, right? So I've been in a Slack channel, for example, and business people are talking about some issue. And because they were talking about it and I was there, I just went and ran some analysis and shared it with them. And they found that, sometimes they find it helpful. Sometimes they're like, oh, that's nice, but that's not really going to help what we want to do. Delphi could easily do that, like if it's listening. But I wonder whether people are ready for that. I mean, they'd have to like very explicitly choose for Delphi to be listening. But it's kind of like Alexa listening to you at home, right? You don't always want it.
True.
Yeah.
I assume you're writing a letter, so like, let me help you. But I think. I mean, this is like why it makes this space so fascinating and interesting, because like it opens so many interesting, I don't know, interaction ways that never would be possible in, let's say, this weird self-service BI world before. So are you, maybe as a final question on let's say on Delphi, are you planning to, so I guess you will stick with the semantic layer because like it totally makes sense, but are you planning to play around, let's say, with additional approaches to make it easier, also like for people who don't have it, or do you really try to get into and say, hey, we want to motivate you, we want to make it easy for you to have a semantic layer? So what's your approach there?
So the way I'd say is whenever anyone uses data, there is always a semantic layer. It might be like, it might be this, it might be explicit, it might be inside your LLM. Like if you're doing text to SQL with an LLM, it generates a semantic layer every time you ask it a question. So there is always a semantic layer. The question is whether the team has the capability to handle building it themselves or maintaining it. And so like one of the things we've thought about is, could we, for example, generate like a semantic layer, not our own proprietary format, but like one of the open source formats, generate it for that team who doesn't have one, store it and host it to use for Delphi in the background. And maybe one day they are capable and want to take it over and they can have it, or maybe they never do because they're just too busy doing what they need to do. And that's one thing that we've thought about to help those teams, and maybe even have like a conversational way to, like, you know, maybe there's super admin people in Delphi who can say, oh, Delphi, I want to make a new metric. And Delphi says, okay, tell me what the metric is. And you say, well, I want to sum this column from this table and filter it in such a way, and that's what this metric means. I'm going to call it this. I'm going to have this description for it. And you've had this conversation with Delphi, and Delphi just makes the PR and merges it to the semantic layer, right? That's one thing I've considered as another way as well. Like you have this MVP of a semantic layer just through that. But yeah, we will experiment with helping teams with semantic layers. Because I don't see a way without it, but but that's not necessarily a blocker if we can provide it.
No, I think the beauty of it is like that you still then have this, let's say, formalized layer in between that can checked in, can be, let's say, improved and so on. But so this is basically like, how to say, this is like the foundation then how everything is working. So because like coming back, what I really like is like it also then gives you as a data team to improve things. So like to see, okay, we don't really get the answers out that we want to, and so here's an easy way to do this. So I think this is like often like, especially like when I work with some chatbots, there's always the question. So when I'm testing it out and it's like, yeah, so this is interesting, but not definitely not what's right and correct. So how do I improve it? So of course I can tell the chatbot, sorry, this is not correct. So this is the right approach, and I can hope that it basically puts it in. But the semantic layer, since I basically can go in and can just say, okay, I changed that myself, this can really bring something up.
But you can also feed back, like say with Delphi, for example, even where Delphi does generate a new request, then we've done the prompt engineering and created the semantic layer API request. We read that back to the person, right, in natural language, like an analyst would tell you. So you imagine you spoke to an analyst and you said, I want revenue by marketing channel last week. Analyst says, I'm going to pull gross merchandise value, net of refunds, promo codes applied by UTM channel, where last week is by order created date. And so they've kind of framed the question a bit for the user. The user then says to them, actually, I don't want it by order created date. I want to order ship date. And you can have all of that like interaction with Delphi today, but also you can just say thumbs down, I didn't like the response. So you've got that feedback mechanism. That's like one of the things we really feel super valuable, is that the richness of the metadata. You just start seeing this is how people interact with data in a company.
Yeah. So before we come to the lightning round, which I'm really looking forward to, because like I spent quite a lot of time to think about good questions. So as a final one, like for everyone who's watching, I think you can go to the website and sign up already, or still is like sign up on the wait list?
It's not really a wait list anymore. You can just go. We found it's helpful to have a chat with us. So all you do is you basically book a slot in Michael's calendar when you get started on the website, and then we'll get you set up within 24 hours.
Yeah. So I highly recommend. One thing that I took away, which was really, really cool, because I tested out all the early Slack BI stuff that was out there. What was immediately different with Delphi was how Delphi could translate stuff that I just write, how I write, into things that really make sense. So then my problem was then because the semantic layer was not okay, or I was just missing data and was not there yet. But the translation of what I said to what actually should be pulled was always really, really good. And it basically didn't require me to do this weird I have to write queries in a normal language. I could just write whatever I think about, and I tested it against that, and that was already really, really good. So yeah, I would highly recommend everyone to test it out, because like it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, please do get in touch if you want to try it out.
Yeah. Okay. Lightning round, because like this is I have some interesting questions where, so lightning round. So I'm basically throwing something at you. It's usually like X versus B. So you can have a very quick answer. Maybe I ask you why, but it's like, so the fun of it is like, so okay,
I'm ready.
I want to get that tendency. So let's start, because like we talked a lot about it. Cube or the DBT metric flow semantic layer? What do you prefer?
This is easy because Cube is available right now. So Cube.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put availability aside. So because like I think you tested out metric flow as well. So like they are slightly different kind of approaches both have. This is like why I put them in there.
Yeah, that's then a harder question. Assuming like the DBT ones to like Cube, like metric flows deployed in DBT. I'm not sure yet. I feel like I want to say Cube for now, and then maybe by Christmas I'll be starting to say, well, on this nuance scenario, use Cube, and on this nuance scenario, use the DBT one. You know, that's probably where I'll end up, I think.
Oh, that's a good answer. I think we can take it. Put it still out there. So Airflow, Prefect, or Dexter.
Dexter.
If you do Dexter, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe just a quick why, because like it's closer to data use cases, or are there even more cases where you would say?
Like when I got to the end of it and I was starting to build more advanced things like with multiple repositories and things like that, just how well it automatically links everything together. So, you know, you can just declare sources in one DBT project to another, and it knows and it highlights it for you visually, and you can see the whole lineage. And the way that software-defined assets is been built in Dagster is just fantastic. Like you can just say, I want this last thing in the DAG, run everything before it, right? And it's kind of like how you can do that with DBT run plus model, right?
Yeah.
But it goes the whole way back. It can go into like your Fivetran ELT jobs, and it's just so powerful, and it's so minimal. It runs exactly what you need and nothing else. I just found that I haven't seen anything else like it. In fact, I think if I was to do any like consulting anytime soon, what I would do is I would just start with the Dagster project and just build DBT inside it. That's what I would do.
Yeah, makes sense. Did you also like try out the, let's say, the native kind of orchestrators on the cloud platform, so like Google Workflows and so on?
I tried MWAA, which is do you mean like AWS step function versus Google?
Yeah, for example.
I didn't try those actually. I don't think I'm familiar enough with how they work. I imagine like you have to run a container or a shell, like a shell command, shell script, and that's what the step function is.
So I don't really play a lot with step functions, but I use, because like Robert Salin was promoted it very, very much to me to try out GCP workflows, and I had two projects where the company, I didn't want to introduce a too complicated stack, and so I said, okay, I wanted to keep everything. Let's just use the existing cloud services that are there, and then I tried workflows. It took a little bit. It was, at least like in the beginning, a little bit of learning curve, because you have to write a very specific kind of YAML format to get it up running. In the end, it was really like build pipelines to some degree. But once you figure out also like how to do loops and case statements, which is not so nice like in the other tools, but once you figure it out, it works pretty well. So this is nice. So you keep it all, but then just all in GCP. So it's worth a shot if someone doesn't want to introduce something new. Yeah, but I will definitely take the Dexter one because like it's on my list too, and I really want to try it out as well. Okay, totally different question. When you go on holidays, beach or mountains?
Oh, that's really hard.
But it's good because most of the people already have a tendency.
I'd probably say mountains because
Oh,
if I was doing a whole holiday, like would I want to spend a whole holiday, like a whole week at the beach? Maybe not. Whereas mountains, you won't get bored of, right? There's always
true.
like another thing to climb. Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to just 1 week at the beach right now because I don't have to think about something. So like the kids are in the water, I'm in the water, so it's great. Yeah, but I get what you mean. Mountains can have different aspects. Another one, let's see if this makes sense. Board games or video games?
At this point in time, I'd say board games, right? I haven't played video games for months now, and I do play board games, like very complicated grown-up board games, every like on Tuesday nights, and it's really nice actually because it's like completely not screen, and so
True.
I just don't look at my phone. I have like this 2-3 hours with some like other parents in my village, and we play, Terraforming Mars or Wingspan or one of these complicated games. I have to like learn how to play before I can. So it's like it's good. I think it's a really good like mental break.
Yeah, I should do more of this as well. So do you have one or two that you would recommend to people watching it? So to just pick up something interesting and new.
So I think I think those two, like Terraforming Mars and Wingspan, they were really good. Yeah.
Cool. We should find them and put them as links in here so people can find it. So final question. I already had a very interesting answer by chat last time, and so I'm really interested what you say. So what would you recommend as a really good food after let's say a really complicated data day where you had to find, I don't know, the 0.2% difference between 300 models and so on, where you're totally exhausted? So what is basically something that you use if you would use food to cheer you up?
Wow, like real comfort food is, I guess, what
Yeah.
I'm thinking. I want to say like something like barbecue and mac and cheese, and something like that sounds like really nice, like filling and comforting after a hard day. That's probably what I say. It's not the most healthy thing that you could choose, but it's like if it's been a bad day.
It's so rare that you have these bad days in data, so I think it should be totally fine.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good one. I can definitely see that that this helps. Perfect. Thank you so much. This was really great. So I really have some points that not just the Dexter point. I really have some points that I take away. Also, really like to say maybe really like introduce the semantic layer really from day one as a kind of concept that is there. This is definitely something that I want to take away because like I never really thought about it. It was just like a spontaneous idea and it totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been great fun.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm waiting for your next Substacks and anything else that you do.
Yeah, every week there will be a Substack.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. Okay, everyone else, thanks for tuning in, and see you already next week. So I do one already next week because afterwards I go to the beach, as I already said, for 2 weeks. All right.